Gilbert. It is time now for Compas on the LA beat. And I got to ask you, I'm curious. Everybody's been saying, like, some people said that Cam Akers had to be taken to the back because he got really roughed up. Is that true? Like, did he get touched up or
no? They're both.
I saw him tweeting, and I love how people tweet after the touch up and all that stuff happens. But like, give me the insight. What happened? Give me the skinny.
No, they were both wearing helmets. Like, there's such a he's the dumb
I don't
one
understand why people
throwing a punch when he's wearing a helmet. So like, and like overall, like it wasn't a good look for Cam Akers, but he didn't get the combo from Sean O'Malley. Like they were wearing helmets, like he was fine. And then he was just walking off the field with his helmet off because like, why are you gonna wear? I like he takes off the helmet after the fight, but that's fine too. But the only thing I saw was like he was just frustrated with a guy who likes to talk a lot. You know, he's a big yapper and he's a good player, so he gets in your head a lot. And then when the defensive end is running down the field to chase you to knock the ball loose, that's annoying. But don't throw a punch. And obviously, Sean McVay was not here for an excuse, and he said that type of nonsense. Immediately, you get to go back to the locker room. So that was pretty much what it was. I don't think it was like
welcome, Berto. I'm not gonna put up with that. I mean, that sounds like what the team is all about.
Yeah, your Sean McVay is a little southern, but you're close there. But he was annoyed when people were asking questions about the fight. He's like, no nonsense. And then I threw one at the end, and I'm like, oh, just like old times, kind of give him a little.
There he goes. There he goes. He had to ask one. So Raiders and Rams was interesting. Was there anything interesting besides that, or?
Well, that's
what I saw certain people saying the offensive line is dominating the defensive line of the Raiders is dominating the offensive line of the Rams. I'm like, well, that's what everybody's been talking
about.
Maxx
Crosby plays there, and yeah, that's it.
And the Rams' offensive line is not good.
It's not good. So it's like I was telling somebody earlier, like sometimes you ask me about players, I'm like, just make it simple. If you stand down, you make plays, you're really good, and that's what Maxx Crosby does. And you know, other guys need to step up, but I think after the fight, Crosby actually motivated some of his guys, and I think they stepped up. But again, it's during practice, and I really like how the Rams and the Raiders did, at least from my point of view, like the media, like, you know, they let the media stand like in the middle of two fields. You get to watch both fields. And then at one point they made it more like a game setting, and they all went into one field, and they kind of just said, okay, Jimmy, go here, Matthew, go here. And it was kind of like move the ball up the field, 2-minute drill. So, there's a lot of competitive juices, got a game-like setting. So I think that was pretty cool for them to do in a controlled environment. But again, like I saw the Raiders in person, and I just saw Jimmy throwing the ball to dominant Devontae Adams. I'm like, hey, they got some dudes there, so maybe I'm liking the squad. The same thing. I probably would have been doing the same thing with the Rams if Cooper Kupp was out there, but he wasn't. He has the hammy there. But
returning.
I think they might have their joint scrimmages with the Broncos, and he might participate in that. But again, a lot of teams are canceling joint scrimmages, so I don't know. That'll be
I thought that was interesting. During the Chargers Saints game, they announced that Houston had canceled their joint practices with the Saints. So I don't know if it's because of all the fights, but the Chargers had no fights.
Well, that's the funny thing. Like when I scheduled my my 2 visits for joint scrimmages, I'm like, okay, they might cancel the second one because of fights. So I went to the first one of the Rams Raiders and the first one Chargers Saints. So, but yeah, there was only one fight from the 2 days I went to, or I guess all 4 days, right? So, but it was cool to see these joint scrimmages back to back and avoid all the preseason stuff. It's good for Dan. I don't get mad if you're listening to the show. It's good for the people fighting on the 53-man roster, but for the first team, we don't really care.
Yeah, no, it was definitely. I mean, to watch the Saints, there, man, I couldn't remember all the people that were there. Like Jimmy Graham was there. I
forgot about it. When I saw him, I'm like, Jimmy Graham.
Yeah, I was like, Jimmy Graham. And then, dude, you should have seen on Friday, a bunch of fans gave Jamal Williams like anime stuff. So he came over with like his hands full of like anime stuff and like hats and sunglasses and stuff. And I'm like, I was like, Jamal, how are you doing? He's like, man, look at all this free stuff I just got. He's like, the rich only get richer. And I started laughing. And he's like, cool. Fans are always like giving me stuff. And I just started laughing. And so he was actually pretty cool. I think I told you that I got to cover him when BYU was in San Diego for the Holiday Bowl or the something bowl, one of those bowl games. And he was the MVP of the bowl. And he was actually coming off the field, and I was like, "Hey, can I talk to you?" "Yeah, man, let's do it." And I was like, "Oh wow!" Like I didn't think I could grab him on the field, but I just talked to him. I wrote my article about it, and I sent it in or
Nice.
whatever. And he was awesome. Like and I even told my boss, I'm like, "Hey, I got a one-on-one with the MVP." He's like, "How?" I'm like, "I just started talking to him," and he's like, "Oh wow, that's pretty cool." So Jamal's always been a good guy, but they also had I forgot. Well, I didn't forget this one. They had the Honey Badger. Lattimore didn't practice the second day, but
Yeah.
they had some they have some big names on that team. Cam Jordan. By the way, dude, I know you were over at Saints when this happened, but Cam Jordan is walking by and he looks over and Khalil Mack is talking to us. He's like, "Can you put on a goddamn shirt?" He's like, "Why are you always shirtless? Nobody wants to see all that." And then Cam turns to me and he goes, "You know what? If I looked like that, I would probably have my shirt off too." He's like, "That dude looks like he's straight out of Wakanda." And I started dying of laughter. I was like,
You
"Oh
still
my
do that.
god."
Does he still have the handlebar mustache?
Who had that? Him?
Cam Jordan had one at
Oh,
Florida
I didn't
State.
even see. Oh, I mean, oh, you know what? Yeah, I don't know. I didn't really look at his
Okay. Yeah, you would have
facial.
noticed, put it that way.
Okay, yeah. Well, he was like, because I was trying to pay attention to Khalil, and I was
Yeah.
like looking over at him because then Keenan came over and started talking to him. So I don't remember seeing his face all that much, but I just thought it was funny what he was saying to Khalil. So I thought that was a pretty funny comment, but it was good because you had Chargers beat reporters, you had Saints beat reporters, and then you had Raiders beat reporters there
Yeah. Yeah.
trying to interview Derek Carr and some of the other guys, which was actually pretty funny.
Yeah, I was next to Adam Hill I was watching him track down David Carr. It was David Carr. Wow, I did the mistake. Derek Carr. There you go.
David
But
Carr lives vicariously through Derek Carr. Remember, hey, don't
yeah,
forget what he said last year. Derek Carr will be the MVP and they'll win the Super Bowl. David, good thing you didn't put your career
that's
on the line because that would have been you would have been like Ric Flair. You would have gotten sweet chin music by that prediction. So
that's a good brother support. That's all I take it as. And by the way, shout out to Derek Carr because he did recognize the Raiders media and he went to talk to him. So that's pretty good. I like when players do that, like when they leave and they come back and they make time. Even like guys like Dennis Allen, a former Raiders
yeah.
coach. So
No,
that was pretty cool.
and by the way, I got to shout out Adam Hill because he texts me and Thursday and he goes, "Hey, what time does the train leave you tomorrow?" And I'm like, "This time, why?" He's like, "I'll be there for you." And I was like, "No, don't worry about it." He's like, "Dude, I'm gonna be there for you." And I was like, "Oh," I was like, "I appreciate it." And as soon as I showed up and I got off the train, I hadn't texted him that day. I'm like, "Hey, the train's pulling up." He's like, "Yeah, I just saw it." He's like, "I'm right over here." I'm like, "Oh wow." So
Look
he
at
gave me a ride.
that.
That was pretty cool. And I got to talk to. I basically talked the whole practice him and Miles and Vic Toffer. So definitely interesting to see
Oh,
those
nice.
guys, and it was great to see them.
Yeah, that's I got to hang out with them on Thursday. And by the way, before I forget, Fernando, it's funny how people really take the joint scrimmages so seriously. Like, hey, who won the Raiders, the Rams, or the Chargers, or the Saints? And that first day, you were helping me out by keeping eyes on the defense for Saints defense. I was there to watch
Yeah,
more of the Saints that day, and so I was watching the Saints offense against the Chargers defense, and you know I guess on social media, there's a couple of videos of Mike Thomas, getting a catch against Derwin James or Olave against Asante Samuel Jr. And people saying, "Man, they were cooking the Chargers secondary." And I'm like, it's 1-on-1, 7-on-7. Like it's bound to happen. You might get a PBU or you might get a catch. And that day, I wrote a story on Michael Thomas, and I do a Google search, and I'm like, there was like 20 stories saying Michael Thomas torch. Olave torched the Chargers secondary. I'm like, it was 1-on-1. And then when it became to 11-on-11, the full team drill, which is more, you take away more from that. It was a little. That's where I got to remind that it's going to be a little rocky for Derek Carr to move the ball up field. Like it's not going to be easy to push it down to Olave every single time. But they do have some nice weapons in Jawan Johnson, the tight end. They do have Alvin Kamara, the rookie running back Keandre Miller. There you go, and
yeah.
Jamal Williams. So if you can push the ball down the field, which we kind of know Derek Carr tends to have an issue with that, a lot of weapons for the intermediate game and the short game. But I just
Well,
found it
Kamara
funny.
won't be there the first
Yeah, so
6
but at least I have
games.
the two running backs to
Yeah,
lean
yeah,
on
yeah.
there. For that, so at least it's gonna be kind of like the Raider offense with Jimmy G. Like it might be kind of a slow move it down the field. But I just found it like I'm not too worried about their offense, but I just found it how like everybody was praising Michael Thomas and Olave for one-on-one drills.
Well, and then I heard from because I asked Adam about that, and Adam's like, "Dude, Khalil Mack and like Joey Bosa were literally like they would have sacked Derek Carr
Oh
probably
yeah.
about 6 times
When it was
each."
11-on-11, it was an
Yeah.
issue.
You know what I think is funny, Gilbert, by the way, when you see pass rushing stuff like that and you see two guys immediately point up in the air and you're like, so which one got the sack? And they're both kind of, especially guys that are like, obviously like they're fighting for a spot on the team and two of them kind of raise their finger and you're like, either they're acknowledging their tribal chief or they both really want the sack and you just see them and they're like, I got it. I just start laughing. But
Did you
see, that was, go ahead.
did you catch the latest episode? Not this week, but
Hard Knocks?
last week of Hard Knocks. Like Quentin Williams kept saying sack
Yeah.
for every time
Sack.
he got one
I
against the
think I got
Panthers.
11 sacks today.
Yeah, and Aaron Rodgers like, hey, he got 11 sacks over here.
That was, by the way, James Campen. We got to cover him when he was here. Aaron Rodgers just roasting him about his weight was hilarious. Like I was like, wow. I'm like, you really went in on him. He's like, you gotta lay off those Pop-Tarts, dude. He's like, I'm only having one.
You know what's funny? You could tell James Campen wanted to tear him back, but he knew the cameras were there, and Rodgers didn't care about the cameras. But you could tell he's holding back.
He was gonna go at him about something about the weirdo stuff that he does, and know that is for a fact. Like, by the way, somebody did that on the Hard Knock. Somebody said, "Oh, unless you've been in a cave for 3 or 4 days or something." Like it was some weird comment, but yeah, no. But going back to it, I saw one of the Saints, Locked On Saints or whatever. They were like, "Oh, the Saints secondary locked down the Chargers receivers," and I was like, "So over there, the Saints cornerbacks were, or the Saints receivers were toasting the Chargers corners, and over here." The cornerbacks were locking down the receivers. I'm like, the one area I will say that was a little bit worrisome, but the Chargers really didn't have all their guys in there. But still, regardless, was red zone. Red zone, they only got one touchdown, and it was off of what's his name? Easton Stick to Stone Smart play. But other than that, there was nothing really
duel.
that, huh?
What a duel!
Yeah, I know. Hey, Stone Smart. I heard a little bit of his journey, and I'm like, oh wow, so he's actually kind of impressive if you kind of hear what his journey's been. But yeah, I just thought that was pretty interesting the way that there was two different narratives and they all kind of changed and everything. I was like, wow, this is interesting. So, but yeah, I thought the joint practices were good. It was good to see some people that I hadn't seen in a while. So, it was definitely a lot of fun.
Yeah, but it just reminded me. Let's fast forward to the regular season.
And all sandwiches were gone by the time we were done with interviews on Friday. Gilbert, you weren't there. We had Jersey Mike's. By the time like Vic, Adam, and I got back to the tent, there was only tuna left, and I ain't no tuna person, so I was like, and then Vic's like, yeah, I'm gonna go buy something to eat. And Adam's like, same here. And then they're like, oh, do you want to join us for lunch? And I'm like, oh, I wish I could, but I have to get back on I have to get on the train because Dan and Dago has a game. And they're like, oh, okay, well, in Vegas, or when we come out to LA, I was like, all right, perfect. I was like, there you go.
You guys went 2 days in a row because that's a lot of Derek Carr coverage there.
Well, no, they also were day 2 was to try and get Khalil Mack.
Okay.
Then Adam was gonna get Foster Moreau. So that's why they went the second day.
A lot of connections there.
And the Raiders were off that day from they were getting ready for their game. So they were like, oh, perfect opportunity. So I was like, oh. And they obviously love me, so obviously that's why they were there too. So.
There you go. Nice reunion.